Picture this. Your boss steals your $1,000,000 idea, humiliates you in front of executives, then tells you to be grateful for the learning experience. 3 years later, he's sitting across from me, desperately pitching why I should save his failing career. The twist? I'm now his superior at a competing firm, and I hold his professional future in my hands. This is the story of how I turned workplace betrayal into the sweetest revenge corporate America has ever seen. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me paint you the full picture of how a 28-year-old marketing analyst named Sarah Martinez went from coffee-fetching punching bag to the executive who made her former boss beg for mercy. Chicago, winter of 2022. The kind of bone-chilling February that makes you question why anyone lives in the Midwest. I was 3 years into my role at Blackstone Financial Solutions, working those brutal 60-hour weeks that corporate America loves to romanticize. I genuinely believed that talent plus hard work equaled success. God, I was naive. The conference room on the 34th floor had those intimidating floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a frozen Lake Michigan. You know the type? Designed to make you feel small while the executives feel powerful. Snow was falling like confetti that Tuesday morning when my world exploded into 1,000 pieces. I'd been with Blackstone for 3 years, consistently crushing every target, bringing in clients that generated millions. I thought I was bulletproof. "Sarah, present your Q4 strategy," commanded Marcus Webb, my direct supervisor, and the man who would soon teach me that corporate politics is a blood sport. Marcus was corporate America's wet dream. 6'2", silver-haired, with that predatory smile that never reached his calculating eyes. He wore his Harvard MBA like a crown, and his Rolex like a weapon, name-dropping connections whenever he needed to establish dominance. I stood up, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I'd spent 3 months perfecting this presentation. Nights, weekends, sacrificing my social life for what I believed would be my breakthrough moment. My digital transformation strategy would revolutionize how we approach client retention, potentially increasing revenue by 35%. The room was packed with senior executives, including CEO Patricia Hamilton. This was my moment. 15 minutes into what should have been my triumph, Marcus struck like a viper. "Sarah, I'm going to stop you there." His voice sliced through the room like a blade through silk. The casual cruelty in his tone made my stomach drop. "This is ambitious, but dangerously unrealistic. Patricia, what Sarah doesn't grasp yet is that innovation without seasoned judgment is just expensive disasters waiting to happen." The oxygen seemed to leave the room. I felt that familiar heat crawling up my neck as every pair of eyes turned to me, like I was some amateur who'd wandered into the wrong meeting. "Marcus, the data supports theoretical nonsense, not practical implementation." He rose from his chair with theatrical precision, moving to command the front of the room like he owned it. Which, let's be honest, he did. Sarah's enthusiasm is admirable, I'll grant her that. But she fundamentally lacks the strategic sophistication necessary for senior-level decision-making. That's precisely why I'm recommending we shelve this fantasy indefinitely. Patricia nodded with the kind of slow, deliberate motion that ends careers. "Marcus, what's your alternative approach?" And then he committed the crime that would ultimately destroy him. Marcus pulled out his laptop and began presenting my strategy. Every innovative insight, every carefully crafted chart, every breakthrough approach I'd spent months developing, but now repackaged as his own intellectual property. He'd somehow infiltrated my files and stolen everything, then had the audacity to present it as his own genius. "This is the strategic framework I've been developing," he announced with the confidence of a sociopath. "A more mature, sophisticated approach to digital client engagement." My hands began trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. I wanted to leap across that conference table and expose him for the fraud he was, but I was trapped in corporate quicksand. In that crystalline moment of humiliation, I learned the most valuable lesson of my career. Truth is worthless without power to enforce it. The meeting ended with applause for Marcus's innovative thinking. I sat there, shell-shocked, watching him accept congratulations for work that had cost me months of my life. After the room cleared, Marcus cornered me by the elevator bank like a predator savoring his kill. "Sarah, you look devastated." His voice dripped with false sympathy. Here's some invaluable advice from someone who's survived this game longer than you. This is how you truly learn. Someday, when you've developed actual strategic maturity, you'll thank me for teaching you how corporate reality actually operates." He leaned closer, and I could smell his expensive cologne mixed with the stench of his corruption. "Consider this your graduation from amateur hour." That night, I sat in my cramped Lincoln Park studio apartment, staring at Chicago's glittering skyline through my tiny window. The humiliation burned in my chest like molten lead, but underneath that searing pain, something else began crystallizing. Ice-cold, methodical determination. I opened my laptop and began researching everything I could about Marcus Webb, corporate warfare, and the art of strategic revenge. If he wanted to play this game, I would master it. But I wouldn't just learn the rules. I would rewrite them entirely. The student was about to become the teacher. The weeks following that meeting were torture. Marcus made sure everyone knew he was the strategic mind behind the revolutionary approach, while I was relegated to data entry and coffee runs. But I wasn't idle. Every morning at 5 a.m. before heading to the office, I worked on my real project, building an exit strategy that would position me as indispensable elsewhere while exposing Marcus's incompetence. I started documenting everything. Every email, every stolen idea, every time Marcus took credit for someone else's work. I created a digital paper trail that would make a prosecutor jealous. But more importantly, I began networking outside Blackstone. LinkedIn became my weapon of choice. I connected with executives at rival firms, shared industry insights, and slowly built a reputation as someone who understood digital transformation. I attended virtual conferences, published thought leadership articles, and positioned myself as an expert in exactly the areas Marcus claimed to dominate. Meanwhile, at Blackstone, Marcus was digging his own grave. Without my ideas to steal, his performance began to slip. The digital transformation he'd pitched? It was failing spectacularly because he didn't actually understand the strategy behind it. 3 months after the humiliation, I got the call that would change everything. Jennifer Walsh, CEO of Morrison & Associates, Blackstone's biggest competitor, wanted to meet. "Sarah, I've been following your work," she said over coffee at a downtown cafe. "Your insights on customer lifecycle management are exactly what we need. I'd like to offer you a position as Director of Strategic Marketing." Director. The title Marcus had denied me was being handed to me by our competition. The salary was 40% higher than what I made at Blackstone. But the real prize was the access it would give me to industry connections and insider knowledge. "There's one condition," I told Jennifer. "I need 6 months to transition properly. I have some unfinished business to handle." She smiled. "I like your style." Back at Blackstone, I played the perfect employee. I smiled at Marcus's condescending comments, nodded when he explained basic concepts to me like I was an intern, and watched as the digital transformation continued to hemorrhage money and clients. But behind the scenes, I was orchestrating something beautiful. Every failure of Marcus's strategy I documented. Every client complaint about the botched implementation, I quietly collected. I was building a case, brick by brick. The best part? Marcus had no idea. He was so convinced of his own superiority that he never considered I might be a threat. To him, I was just another disposable employee who'd been put in her place. By month 4, Blackstone had lost 3 major clients directly due to the failed digital strategy. Patricia Hamilton was asking hard questions, and Marcus was scrambling for answers he didn't have. That's when I made my first subtle move. During a routine team meeting in late spring, Marcus was struggling to explain why client retention had dropped 15% in the digital marketing segment. He was sweating, stumbling over technical terms he clearly didn't understand. "The metrics are challenging to interpret," he said, loosening his tie. "Market conditions have been volatile." I raised my hand quietly. "Marcus, if I may." My voice was steady, professional. "I've been analyzing the data in my spare time, and I think I might have some insights." For the next 10 minutes, I systematically dismantled his strategy while appearing to support it. I used his own words against him, showing how his refined approach had ignored key market indicators that any competent strategist would have considered. The room was dead silent when I finished. Patricia looked intrigued. Marcus looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Sarah, that's very thorough." Patricia said. "Marcus, why wasn't this analysis included in your reports?" Marcus fumbled for an answer, but I'd already moved on to my next chess piece. Over the following weeks, I began having informal conversations with other departments, always framing them as curiosity about how Marcus's strategy was impacting their work. What I discovered was beautiful. Everyone knew Marcus was incompetent. They'd known for months. The only person who didn't know was Patricia, because Marcus was skilled at managing up while terrorizing down. But I gave them something they'd never had before: documentation. Hard data showing exactly how his decisions had cost the company money and reputation. The tipping point came in July. Morrison & Associates publicly announced they'd won the Hartwell Industries account, a $50 million client that had been considering Blackstone until our botched digital strategy scared them away. Patricia called an emergency meeting. The entire senior team was there, including Marcus, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Someone needs to explain to me." Patricia's voice was ice cold. "How we lost the biggest potential client of the year to our direct competitor." Marcus started his usual deflection routine, but I was ready. I had prepared for this moment for months. "Patricia, if I may share some observations?" I stood up, tablet in hand. "I've been tracking the correlation between our client acquisition rates and the implementation timeline of our current digital strategy. For the next 20 minutes, I presented a masterclass in strategic analysis. Every chart, every data point, every conclusion led to one inescapable truth. Marcus Webb was a fraud who had cost the company millions. But I never said his name. I never made personal attacks. I just let the data speak, professional and devastating. When I finished, the room was silent except for the sound of Marcus's career imploding. Patricia's voice was barely above a whisper. "Marcus, is there anything you'd like to add?" He had nothing. For the first time since I'd known him, Marcus Webb was completely speechless. 2 weeks later, I was cleaning out my desk when Patricia approached me. "Sarah, I owe you an apology and an explanation." She sat down across from me, looking older than her 55 years. "I've been CEO for 8 years, and I've made my share of mistakes. But trusting Marcus's judgment over your expertise? That might be my biggest one." I nodded, saying nothing. Sometimes silence is the most powerful response. "I'd like to offer you Marcus's position, Director of Strategic Marketing, with a 60% salary increase and equity options." The offer was tempting. Everything I'd worked for was being handed to me, but I'd already made my choice months ago. "Patricia, I appreciate the offer, but I've accepted a position elsewhere." Her face fell. "Morrison & Associates?" "Yes. I start Monday as Vice President of Strategic Innovation, VP. Higher than the director position Marcus had denied me. Higher than what Patricia was now offering. The irony was delicious. 3 months into my new role, Morrison & Associates was contacted by Blackstone Financial. They wanted to discuss a potential partnership in digital transformation services. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon in Morrison's conference room. When the Blackstone team walked in, I was already seated at the head of the table. Marcus stopped dead when he saw me. The color drained from his face. "Hello, Marcus," I said, my voice professionally pleasant. "Please have a seat." For the next hour, I listened as Marcus, now desperate to save his remaining job, pitched a partnership that would essentially outsource Blackstone's digital strategy to Morrison & Associates. To me, his presentation was a disaster. He stumbled over basic concepts, misread market data, and generally confirmed everything I documented about his incompetence. But I let him finish. I wanted him to feel the full weight of his humiliation. When he was done, I leaned forward slightly. "Marcus, this is interesting, but I have some concerns about Blackstone's strategic direction." For the next 20 minutes, I systematically dismantled his proposal while appearing to give it serious consideration. I used the same patronizing tone he'd used on me, explaining basic concepts like he was a junior analyst. Finally, I delivered the killing blow. "Marcus, you said something to me once about how someday I'd thank you for teaching me how things really work. You were right." I paused, letting the words sink in. I learned that talent without power is just talent waiting to be stolen. I learned that in corporate America, perception often matters more than performance. And I learned that the best revenge isn't anger, it's success. I stood up, smoothing my jacket. Unfortunately, based on what I've seen today, I don't think Blackstone is ready for the kind of strategic partnership Morrison & Associates requires. Perhaps when you have more experienced leadership in your strategic roles. Marcus's face went through a spectrum of emotions: recognition, humiliation, and finally, defeat. He knew exactly what I was saying. He knew that I held his professional future in my hands. As they packed up their materials, Marcus approached me. His voice was barely a whisper. "Sarah, I'm sorry. About before. About everything." I looked at him for a long moment. 3 years ago, this man had humiliated me in front of my peers, stolen my work, and told me I should be grateful for the lesson. "Marcus," I said quietly, "thank you." He looked confused. "Thank you for teaching me that I never wanted to be the kind of leader who tears people down to build themselves up. Thank you for showing me what success without character looks like. And thank you for proving that eventually, talent rises and mediocrity falls." I walked toward the door, then turned back one final time. "Oh, and Marcus, you're welcome." 6 months later, Marcus Webb was quietly let go from Blackstone Financial. I heard through industry contacts that he's working at a much smaller firm now, for significantly less money. As for me, I'm thriving at Morrison & Associates. We've become the leading firm in digital transformation consulting, largely because we focus on developing talent instead of stealing it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming so successful that they destroy themselves trying to compete with you. And sometimes, just sometimes, they even thank you for the lesson.